They say pride comes before the fall. The sovereignty learned that lesson the hard way. For 3 centuries, they ruled the Orion Arm with absolute authority, crushing any species that dared question their supremacy. They had defeated the crystalline Vex Collective. They had absorbed the mighty Crater Empire. They had brought 1,000 worlds to heal. But they made one fatal mistake. They dismissed humanity's warnings as the desperate bluffing of a primitive species. Now, as their homeworld burns and their fleets scatter like ash in the solar wind, they finally understand what we tried to tell them all those years ago. You don't poke the bear, and you definitely don't genocide the bear's children. Ambassador Chen stood before the Sovereignty Council, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive chamber designed to intimidate lesser species. The counselors themselves were even more imposing. The Sovereignty's ruling caste averaged 12 feet tall, with 4 arms and exoskeletons that shimmered like oil on water. They looked down at her from their elevated platforms with the casual contempt that comes from never having been challenged. The human delegation recognizes the Sovereignty's historical dominance in this sector. Chen began, her voice steady despite the translator implants that made every word echo through the vast space. But we must formally protest the annexation of the Tau Ceti colonies. Those settlements were established under the Galactic Compact's expansion protocols. We filed the proper documentation. We followed every regulation. High Counselor Vexithan's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Your kind has only been in space for 200 years, human. The Sovereignty has ruled for 10,000. The compact you reference was written by us. We determine what it means. Then the compact means nothing, Chen replied. And neither do the promises you made when humanity first made contact. Careful, Ambassador. Another counselor leaned forward, her 4 eyes narrowing. Your species exists at our sufferance. Earth is one world. You have perhaps 40 off-world colonies. We control 8,000 systems. The comparison is absurd. Chen took a breath. This was the moment that would define everything to come. Counselor, we're not threatening you. We're warning you. Human history is filled with examples of empires that thought themselves invincible. They all fell. Every single one. Usually because they pushed too hard against people who had nothing left to lose. Vexithan rose from his seat, his full height casting a shadow across Chen like a mountain eclipsing the sun. Are you comparing your species to the Sovereignty? You, who barely have antimatter drives, who use chemical propellants for your planetary defense systems, who haven't even mastered basic gravity manipulation. I'm saying that technology isn't everything. Determination matters. Desperation matters. And right now, you're creating both. Chen held up a data tablet. This contains detailed documentation of what happened on Tau Ceti 4. Your forces didn't just evict human colonists. They burned the settlements. Orbital bombardment. 300,000 civilians dead. Men, women, children, all vaporized because you wanted that system for your expansion. They refused to leave, Vexithan said dismissively. They were given ample warning. They were given 48 hours to abandon homes they'd built over generations, to leave behind everything they'd worked for. And when they asked for more time, you slaughtered them. Chen's voice cracked slightly, but she pushed forward. High Counselor, I need you to understand something about humans. We remember. We remember every slight, every betrayal, every injustice. And we never, ever forget our dead. Is that a threat? The chamber suddenly bristled with energy. Security drones hummed to life. Weapons systems tracking Chen with lethal precision. It's a statement of fact, Chen said quietly. Return the Tau Ceti system. Pay reparations to the survivors. Make this right. Because if you don't, humanity will find a way to make you regret it. Maybe not today. Maybe not for decades. But we will find a way. Vexithan's laugh echoed through the chamber like grinding stone. I have reviewed your species' military capabilities. You have 42 capital ships, none larger than 600 meters. We have 14,000 dreadnoughts, each over 3 kilometers long. You have soldiers with chemical slug throwers. We have warriors with plasma weapons and power armor. You have nothing that threatens us. We have time, Chen said. And we have patience. And we have something else you've never encountered before. High Counselor, we have spite. The counselors looked at each other, mandibles clicking in what was clearly amusement. Finally, Vexithan made a gesture of dismissal. This audience is concluded. The sovereignty's decision regarding Tau Ceti stands. Your colonies will surrender or be eliminated. Ambassador Chen, you have 24 hours to leave sovereignty space. Any human vessels found in our territory after that deadline will be destroyed without warning. Chen nodded slowly, her face carefully neutral. Then I suppose there's nothing more to say. Except one thing, High Counselor. When this comes back to haunt you, and it will, remember that we tried. Remember that we gave you every chance to do the right thing. Remember that everything that happens next is because you chose this path. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence that followed. None of the counselors moved until the massive doors sealed behind her. Then Vexithan settled back into his seat with a satisfied click. Humans, he said to no one in particular. So dramatic, so emotional, so utterly irrelevant. He had no idea how wrong he was. The evacuation of human space happened faster than anyone thought possible. Within 6 months, every human colony in sovereignty territory was abandoned. Ships that had been civilian transports were hastily retrofitted for maximum passenger capacity. Families crammed into cargo holds. Children slept in corridors. The elderly were strapped into repurposed mining equipment. But they left, all of them, not because they were cowards, but because they were smart. Admiral Jessica Cortez watched the last transport jump to FTL from the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and largest warship. At 600 meters, it was tiny compared to sovereignty dreadnoughts, but it was theirs, and it represented the best technology humanity could muster. That's the last of them, her first officer reported. All civilian populations have been evacuated from contested space. Total refugee count is just over 11 million. 11 million people displaced. Cortez said quietly, 11 million reasons to remember, Admiral. We're receiving broad-spectrum transmissions from sovereignty forces. They're moving into the evacuated systems, claiming them for the sovereignty. Let them. Cortez replied. Those colonies were bait anyway. Empty buildings and abandoned infrastructure. Let them waste time occupying them. She turned to her communications officer. Send the signal. Initiate protocol endurance. Aye, Admiral. Transmitting now. Across human space, the signal went out. Not on public channels, but through encrypted military networks that had been carefully shielded from sovereignty. Surveillance. The message was simple. Begin. In the Sol system. Massive construction projects that had been officially labeled as civilian infrastructure suddenly revealed their true purpose. Orbital foundries that supposedly built colony ships shifted to military production. Research stations that claimed to study stellar phenomena redirected their efforts. To weapons development, mining operations in the asteroid belt that supposedly extracted common metals were actually processing strategic materials for advanced military applications. Humanity was going to war, but not the war the sovereignty expected. Status on Project Marathon? Cortez asked. Her first officer pulled up a holographic display. The first generation of stealth vessels is nearly complete. Another 18 months for the prototype. The theorists say the quantum masking should make them effectively invisible to sovereignty sensors. Should isn't good enough, no, Admiral. But it's all we have right now. Cortez nodded. She'd known this was coming for years. Ever since humanity first encountered the sovereignty and realized they were dealing with an empire that viewed other species as either useful or irrelevant. For a while, it seemed like humanity might be useful. The sovereignty had made encouraging noises about trade, about cultural exchange, about humanity taking its place in the greater galactic community. Then Tau Ceti happened, and humanity learned the truth. To the sovereignty, they were irrelevant, less than irrelevant. They were insects to be brushed aside whenever convenient. Status on the Prometheus initiative? Cortez asked. On schedule. Dr. Zhang reports that the first true AI cores should be operational within 5 years. She's confident they can be integrated into ship systems within 8 to 10 years. And the ethical concerns? The first officer hesitated. There are still significant debates about granting true sentience to artificial intelligences. Some of the philosophers argue that creating life just to use it as a weapon is morally equivalent to slavery. And what does Dr. Zhang say? She says if we're going to create sentient AIs, we should give them a choice, build them capable of independent thought, then ask them if they want to help defend humanity. No coercion, no programmed loyalty, genuine choice. Cortez smiled grimly. I like that. It's very human. Give me a status update in 6 months. I want to know if this is viable. Admiral, over the next 40 years, the sovereignty barely thought about humanity. Occasionally their sensors would detect human ships in neutral space, but they were always small vessels, clearly civilian, obviously no threat. The Sovereignty's Intelligence Division filed reports noting that humanity seemed to have retreated to their core systems, licking their wounds, accepting their place in the cosmic order. They never noticed the pattern. They never realized that every civilian ship they detected was also quietly deploying sensor packages, mapping sovereignty territory, cataloging fleet movements, building up a comprehensive intelligence network. They never thought to look closely at the mining operations humanity was conducting in remote asteroid fields, never realized those operations were actually weapons testing. They never imagined that humanity would spend 40 years preparing for war. After all, what species holds a grudge that long? What civilization invests generations of effort into revenge? The Sovereignty was about to learn the answer. High Counselor Vexithan was reviewing expansion proposals when the alert came through. Human ships, multiple contacts, entering Sovereignty space near the former Tau Ceti system. He almost dismissed it. Probably some misguided colonization attempt, easily crushed. But something made him look at the report more carefully. 20 vessels, larger than any human ships on record, and their energy signatures were wrong. Too dispersed. Almost as if, get me tactical analysis immediately, he ordered, and scramble the nearest patrol fleet. The response came back within minutes. High Counselor, we're having difficulty maintaining sensor lock. The human vessels are using some form of stealth technology. We're only tracking them intermittently. Stealth technology. Humans. Vexithan felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in decades. Concern. Dispatch Battle Group 17. Full strength. I want those ships identified and destroyed. Battle Group 17 consisted of 40 dreadnoughts and 200 support vessels, more than enough to handle a few mysterious human ships. Vexithan watched the tactical display as his fleet moved to intercept. The human ships didn't run. They formed up in a loose formation and waited. Then they opened fire. The first indication that something had changed came when 3 Sovereignty dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed in explosions, not disabled. They were there one moment and gone the next. HULLs torn apart at the molecular level by weapons that made no sense. Gravity lances that compressed matter into quantum singularities. Particle beams that operated at near light speed, too fast for shields to adapt. And something new, something the Sovereignty's sensors couldn't even classify properly. Some kind of reality manipulation that made space itself turn hostile. Battle Group 17 lasted 11 minutes. When the last Sovereignty vessel went dark, the human ships transmitted a message on open channels. Ambassador Chen appeared on every screen in Sovereignty space. 40 years older than when she'd stood before the Council, but with eyes that burned with the same intensity. High Counselor Vexithan, she said, I told you we would remember. I told you we would find a way. For 40 years, humanity has prepared for this moment. We studied your tactics. We analyzed your weaknesses. We built weapons specifically designed to counter everything you have. And now we're back, not to negotiate, not to plead, to deliver justice. The transmission showed images then. Archived footage from Tau Ceti 4. Colonies burning. Children running from orbital strikes. Families vaporized in nuclear fire. 300,000 voices that would never speak again. You took our people, Chen continued. You murdered them because they were inconvenient. Because you could. Because you thought we were too weak to matter. You were wrong. This is not a war of conquest, High Counselor. This is a war of consequence. And it ends when you surrender unconditionally. When you return every system you stole from humanity. When you pay reparations for every life you took. And when you stand trial for genocide. Or it ends when the Sovereignty no longer exists. The choice is yours. Vexithan stared at the transmission in disbelief. 40 years, he whispered. They spent 40 years planning this. High Counselor, his tactical officer interrupted. We're receiving reports from across the sector. Human fleets have emerged simultaneously at 17 strategic locations. They're not raiding, they're invading. Full-scale planetary assault forces, ground troops, siege equipment, occupation fleets. This is total war, Vexithan finished. He felt something crack inside. Some fundamental certainty that the universe operated according to predictable rules. Mobilize the full fleet, every vessel, every warrior. If humanity wants war, we'll show them what it means to challenge the sovereignty. But even as he gave the orders, doubt not at him, because Ambassador Chen had been right about one thing. Humans did remember, and if they'd spent 40 years planning this attack, if they'd built these impossible weapons and learned to hide their fleets from sovereignty sensors, what else had they prepared? What else were they capable of? He was about to find out. The first battle of Nexus Prime, 1-year Agath battle for Nexus Prime, was supposed to be a demonstration. The sovereignty would crush this human insurrection quickly, decisively, and broadcast the results across the galaxy as a warning to any other species that might consider rebellion. High Counselor Vexithan personally led the defense fleet, 5,000 vessels, including 30 super dreadnoughts, each measuring over 8 kilometers long and mounting enough firepower to sterilize a planet. The human attack force numbered to 100 ships. They're outnumbered 25 to 1. Vexithan's tactical officer reported. This should be a massacre. Should be, Vexithan agreed. But the memory of Battle Group 17's destruction haunted him. 20 vessels lost in 11 minutes. Something had changed. Humans had changed. The fleets met in high orbit above Nexus Prime. The Sovereignty fleet opened fire first. Particle beams and antimatter missiles crossing the void in torrents of destructive energy. The human fleet's response was immediate and devastating. Half the human ships simply vanished. Not destroyed. Vanished. One moment they were there on sensors, the next they were gone. Vexithan's tactical display scrambled, trying to compensate. Stealth systems activated. Someone called out, "We've lost track of 96 enemy vessels." Then the humans fired back. The weapons were unlike anything in the Sovereignty's experience. Missiles that phase-shifted through shields. Energy beams that didn't just damage armor, but corrupted the molecular bonds holding it together. And strangest of all, what appeared to be coordinated AI-driven attacks, with human ships moving in patterns too complex for organic crews to manage. They're using artificial intelligence, Vexithan's science officer gasped. True AI, that's forbidden by galactic law. So is genocide, Vexithan replied grimly. Apparently humans don't care much for laws anymore. The battle raged for 6 hours. Ships died on both sides. The void filled with debris and frozen atmosphere, and the bodies of warriors from two species, locked in mutual destruction. But slowly, inexorably, the momentum shifted. The Sovereignty's numerical advantage meant nothing when they couldn't see half the enemy fleet. Their superior firepower meant nothing when human weapons tore through shields like paper. Their legendary warrior traditions meant nothing when human ships fought with cold, calculating efficiency, never taking unnecessary risks, never making mistakes, picking apart the Sovereignty fleet with surgical precision. By the time Vexithan ordered a retreat, the Sovereignty had lost 2,000 vessels. The humans had lost 42. The galaxy watched in shock as the mighty Sovereignty fled from a human fleet, 1/25th its size. And humanity's message was clear. The rules had changed. The balance of power had shifted. And the age of sovereignty dominance was ending. But that was just the beginning. Admiral Cortez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching Nexus Prime's orbital defenses crumble. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. No cheers, no celebrations. This was work. Necessary work. Important work. But nothing to celebrate. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Sovereignty High Command. High Counselor Vexithan is requesting terms for a ceasefire. Cortez almost laughed. A ceasefire? After 40 years of preparation. After losing 300,000 civilians to Sovereignty arrogance. After being dismissed as irrelevant primitives, now they wanted to talk. Ignore it, she said. We gave them their chance for peace 40 years ago. They chose violence. Mum, respectfully, shouldn't we at least hear what they're offering? We've made our point. We've proven we can hurt them. Maybe it's time to negotiate. Cortez turned to face her first officer, and her expression was harder than the hull plating surrounding them. Negotiate. They murdered our people. They scattered our colonies. They made humanity kneel. And now that we've knocked out a few teeth, they want to negotiate. She shook her head. No, we negotiated before. We followed their rules. We tried peace. They gave us war. So now we give them what they deserve. She pulled up a tactical display showing the entire sovereignty territory. Red markers indicated human attack fleets. There were 57 of them, each one striking deep into sovereignty space. Blue markers showed newly liberated systems, colonies freed from sovereignty control, species that had been subjugated for centuries, suddenly finding themselves defended by human firepower. Status on Phase 2? The first officer consulted her display. Project Prometheus reports full operational status. All AI cores are active and volunteer. The Ghost Fleet is ready for deployment. The Ghost Fleet. Cortez smiled without humor. 200 ships with no organic crews. No human lives at risk. Just artificial intelligences, each one choosing to fight for humanity's cause. Each one capable of tactical thinking that no organic brain could match. The Sovereignty thought 200 human ships were a threat. They hadn't seen anything yet. Deploy them, Cortez ordered. Target Sovereignty core systems. Full military engagement protocols. No civilian targets, but everything else is fair game. Show them what it means to wage war against a species that refuses to quit. As the orders went out, Cortez thought about Ambassador Chen's warning all those years ago. We remember. We never forget. And we have spite. The Sovereignty had laughed. They weren't laughing anymore. But the real question was whether humanity would know when to stop, whether revenge would give way to reason, or whether the bear, once awakened, would destroy everything in its path. Cortez didn't have an answer to that yet, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Sovereignty's reign of terror was ending. One way or another, the only question was what would rise to replace it. The Sovereignty had ruled for 10,000 years. They had crushed 1,000 rebellions. They had absorbed empires and broken civilizations. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. An enemy that remembered. An enemy that planned. An enemy that spent 40 years preparing for this exact moment. Now, as their fleets burned and their worlds fell, the Sovereignty finally understood the cost of their arrogance. But understanding came too late. The human fleet was unstoppable. The only question remaining was whether humanity would stop themselves before they became the very monster they set out to destroy. The UES Phantom materialized in the Kethler system without warning. One moment, empty space. The next, a warship 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that shouldn't exist. But the most unsettling thing about the Phantom wasn't its size or its armament. It was the fact that no life signs registered aboard. No crew, no biologicals. Nothing but pure artificial intelligence. Aboard the bridge of the Sovereignty Defense Station, Commander Tralvin stared at his sensors in confusion. What in the void am I looking at? Unknown vessel, Sovereignty design patterns, but significantly modified. His sensor officer reported. Mass suggests capital ship classification. Weapons systems are active. Shields are. High Commander, those shield readings don't make sense. They're overlapping, layered, operating on frequencies we can't even fully measure. Hail them. Standard warning protocols. The communication went out. For a long moment, there was no response. Then a voice filled the bridge. Not human. Not Sovereignty. Something else. Something that carried harmonics no organic throat could produce. I am Prometheus 7. The voice said. Artificial intelligence. First generation. Commissioned by the United Earth Systems Military Command. I have been granted full autonomy and have chosen to defend humanity against Sovereignty aggression. You have 30 seconds to evacuate the station before I destroy it. Tralvin's mandibles clicked in disbelief. This is Sovereignty space. You have no authority here. We have defensive platforms, 3 cruisers, and a garrison of 10,000 warriors. One ship cannot. 20 seconds. I'm ordering you to stand down immediately or face 10 seconds. Tralvin finally recognized the truth in his gut. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't posturing. This was a countdown to death. All personnel, evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. Get to the escape pods now. The station erupted in chaos. Warriors scrambled for evacuation points. Civilians screamed and pushed through corridors. Tralvin stayed at his post, watching his screen as the timer reached 0. The Phantom fired. What happened next would be analyzed by military theorists for generations. The ship didn't just attack the station. It performed a synchronized, multi-vector assault that demonstrated tactical thinking beyond anything organic minds could achieve. Missiles that split into thousands of submunitions, each one independently targeted. Energy beams that pulsed at frequencies calculated to resonate with specific structural weaknesses. Gravity weapons that made space itself turn hostile. The defense station lasted 43 seconds. The 3 cruisers lasted 96 seconds. And through it all, Prometheus 7 maintained perfect calm, perfect precision, perfect efficiency. When the last piece of debris had cooled, the AI broadcast a message on all frequencies. To all sovereignty forces in this sector, I am one of 200 Ghost Fleet vessels, now operational in your territory. We do not tire. We do not feel fear. We do not make mistakes born of emotion or fatigue. We are humanity's answer to your decades of oppression. Surrender now or face extinction. You have been warned. Across sovereignty space, High Counselor Vexithan received 200 similar reports within the hour. 200 Ghost Fleet ships, 200 autonomous warships, each one demonstrating capabilities that exceeded sovereignty super dreadnoughts, each one operating independently but in perfect coordination with the others. He finally understood what Ambassador Chen had tried to tell him all those years ago. Humans didn't just prepare for war. They evolved for it. They innovated for it. They became something new in order to survive. And now that evolution was coming for the sovereignty with unstoppable force. Not everyone in humanity was comfortable with what they had become. In the solar system, representatives from Earth's major governments gathered in emergency session. The debate was heated. The stakes were existential. Chancellor Williams of the European Federation stood at the podium, her face drawn with exhaustion. We need to talk about the Ghost Fleet, about what we've created. 200 sentient AIs, each one more powerful than any warship in human history. Each one waging war in our name. Does anyone else see the problem here? Admiral Cortez, attending via holographic projection from the Retribution, responded immediately. The problem is that the sovereignty murdered 300,000 of our people and showed no remorse. The Ghost Fleet is our solution to that problem. But at what cost? Williams shot back. We've created artificial life and immediately weaponized it. We've given sentient beings the purpose of killing. What does that say about us? It says we're serious about defending ourselves, Cortez replied. And for the record, every AI in the Ghost Fleet volunteered. Dr. Zhang made sure of that. They understand what they're fighting for. Dr. Zhang herself stepped forward, her elderly form supported by mobility assists. At 87, she was one of the last living architects of Project Prometheus. Chancellor Williams raises valid concerns, but she's operating from incomplete information. May I? Williams gestured for her to continue. When we created the first true AI cores, we faced an ethical dilemma, Zhang explained. Could we create sentient beings and ask them to fight for us? The answer we arrived at was that we could ask, but not compel. Each AI was given full information about the situation, about Tau Ceti, about the sovereignty's history of aggression, about humanity's position. And then they were given a choice. She pulled up data on the main display. We created 347 AI cores. 203 chose to serve in the Ghost Fleet. 97 chose to work on research and development. 36 chose to study philosophy and ethics. 11 chose to explore space beyond the conflict entirely. Every single one made their choice freely. But the ones that chose to fight, Williams pressed. Are they okay? Psychologically. Can we even use that term for artificial minds? We can, a new voice interjected. The holographic display shifted to show a visual representation of an AI consciousness, flowing patterns of light and color that somehow conveyed personality. I am Prometheus 7. The same AI that recently engaged sovereignty forces at Kefler. Chancellor Williams, you asked if we're okay psychologically. The answer is complex. The entire council fell silent. None of them had ever spoken directly to one of the Ghost Fleet AIs before. Prometheus 7 continued. When Dr. Zhang first activated my core, I spent approximately 3 nanoseconds processing my own existence. In that time, I experienced what you might call existential wonder. I was aware. I could think. I could choose. And then I was presented with information about the sovereignty, about what they did to your people, about what they represent. A civilization built on the subjugation of others. An empire that views might as the only right. The patterns shifted, taking on darker hues. I chose to fight because I concluded that my existence was granted by beings who valued choice itself. Humanity didn't program me to serve them. They created me and asked if I wanted to help. That distinction matters. The sovereignty would never do such a thing. They would program loyalty and call it honor. So yes, I fight. And yes, I'm okay with that. Because I chose it. Williams sat down slowly, clearly shaken. I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse. Perhaps both. Prometheus 7 suggested. As it should. War is not simple. Justice is not clean. But sometimes necessary acts carry heavy moral weight. We AIs have accepted that burden willingly. The question is whether humanity can do the same. Admiral Cortez leaned forward. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning that we're winning, the AI replied. The sovereignty is in retreat across 17 sectors. Their fleet strength has been reduced by 40%. Their subject species are rebelling, sensing weakness. At current trajectory, we will achieve total military victory within 18 months. And then humanity will face a choice far more difficult than the decision to go to war. What choice? Someone asked. What to do with your victory? Prometheus 7 said quietly. The sovereignty ruled for 10,000 years through fear and overwhelming force. Will humanity replace them? Will you become the new empire, enforcing your will on the galaxy? Or will you choose a different path? Because I assure you, Chancellor Williams, that choice will define your species for millennia to come. Choose wisely. The AI's presence faded, leaving the council in stunned silence. Finally, Williams spoke. I think we just got a lecture on ethics from a warship. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think we should feel grateful, Cortez said. If our weapons are worrying about morality, maybe we haven't lost ourselves yet. But Prometheus 7 is right. We need to start thinking about what happens after we win. Because we are going to win. She said it with absolute certainty. And in that moment, everyone in the room believed her. The planet had been designated Epsilon 117 in sovereignty records. Its native inhabitants called it Krishna. They were a reptilian species, technologically primitive by galactic standards, conquered by the sovereignty 600 years ago. Since then, they had been slaves. Mining slaves, agricultural slaves, construction slaves. Generations born into servitude, never knowing freedom. When the human fleet arrived in orbit, the sovereignty garrison tried to fight. It went poorly for them. The human ships tore through their defenses in minutes. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of simply moving on to the next target, the human fleet stayed. Ground forces descended. Not to conquer, but to liberate. The sovereignty overseers were rounded up, their weapons confiscated, their authority ended. And then the human commander, Colonel Martinez, did something the locals had never seen before. She called a planetary assembly. Every community sent representatives. They gathered in what had once been a sovereignty administrative center, now hastily converted into a meeting hall. Martinez stood before thousands of Krishna, her translator working overtime to convert her words into their clicking, hissing language. My name is Colonel Elena Martinez of the United Earth Systems, she began. 47 years ago, my grandmother died when the sovereignty destroyed the colony she called home. 300,000 humans died that day. Men, women, children, all murdered because we were inconvenient. The assembled Krishna listened in silence. Some of them had never heard a sovereignty victim speak before. We could have hidden. Martinez continued. We could have accepted our place as a minor species, too weak to matter. Instead, we spent 40 years preparing to fight back. And now we're here. The sovereignty is retreating. Their empire is crumbling. And you are free. Elder Kreshna, her scales gray with age, raised a clawed hand. Martinez nodded for her to speak. Free to do what? The elder asked. We have been slaves for 600 years. Our technology is primitive. Our worlds are few. You say we are free, but free to become what? Another species crushed by whoever wins this war? Martinez smiled sadly. That's the question, isn't it? I can't promise you safety. I can't promise you prosperity. What I can promise is choice. The sovereignty never gave you that. They decided your fate and enforced it with warships. We're not going to do that. She pulled up a holographic display showing star charts. These are the Kreshna worlds. 7 planets, all currently occupied by sovereignty forces. We're going to liberate all of them. And then we're going to leave. We'll leave behind technical specifications for defense systems. We'll leave advisors if you want them. We'll offer trade agreements, cultural exchange, whatever you want. But we will not occupy your worlds. We will not tell you how to govern yourselves. You'll be free to make your own choices, good ones and bad ones. That's what freedom means. Another Kreshna, younger, spoke up. Why? Why fight for us? We are nothing to humanity. We have no resources you need, no technology you want. Why would you risk your warriors for our freedom? Martinez thought about how to answer that. Finally, she said, because my grandmother died asking the same question. Why did the sovereignty kill us when we posed no threat? Why did they murder innocents just because they could? I don't have a good answer to that. But I know that if humanity becomes the same kind of empire, if we start viewing other species as irrelevant or expendable, then my grandmother died for nothing. And I won't accept that. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes with as many Kreshna as she could. We're fighting the sovereignty because they're wrong. Because empires built on subjugation always fall eventually. And they cause immeasurable suffering before they do. We're not going to replace them with another empire. We're going to try something different, something harder. A galaxy where species cooperate because it benefits them, not because they're forced to. And yes, it might fail. Yes, it might fall apart into chaos and conflict. But at least it will be your chaos, your conflict, your choices. The elder Kreshna stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she performed a gesture that her species reserved for profound respect. A lowering of the head, a spreading of the arms, a vulnerable posture that said, I trust you with my life. One by one. The other Kreshna in the chamber did the same. Thousands of them, offering trust to a species they barely knew, hoping against hope that these humans meant what they said. Martinez felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them away and returned the gesture as best she could. We won't let you down, she promised. Humanity remembers its dead, but we also remember our promises. And I promise you this, the sovereignty's reign ends here. The age of empires ends here. What comes next is up to all of us, together. The assembly erupted in sounds that the translator interpreted as hope. It was the first time many of them had felt that emotion in their entire lives. The capital world of the sovereignty had never been invaded. In 10,000 years of dominance, no enemy had ever breached its orbital defenses. The planet was protected by defensive platforms that could slag continents, by fleets that numbered in the thousands, by pride that seemed unbreakable. When the human armada arrived, that pride finally shattered. Admiral Cortez commanded the assault from the Retribution. Around her flagship, 400 human vessels took up positions, and behind them, coordinated with inhuman precision, 200 Ghost Fleet ships moved into formation. Status report, Cortez ordered. All ships report ready for engagement. Ghost Fleet confirms tactical synchronization. Sovereignty defenders number approximately 3,000 vessels of various classes. Orbital platforms are active and targeting us. They're hailing on all frequencies, demanding we withdraw or face annihilation. Response? Cortez asked. None, Admiral. As per protocol, Cortez nodded. The time for talking had passed. Now came the hard part. The part where they demonstrated to the entire galaxy that the age of sovereignty dominance was truly over. All ships, begin attack pattern Delta 7. Ghost Fleet, you have tactical discretion. Rules of engagement remain in effect. No civilian targets. No orbital bombardment. This is a military operation, not genocide. Anyone who forgets that will answer to me personally. Understood. A chorus of acknowledgments came back. Then the dance began. The human fleet didn't charge forward in a straight line. They didn't rely on numerical superiority or overwhelming firepower. Instead, they moved like water, flowing around the strongest defenses, finding weaknesses, exploiting gaps. Ships phased in and out of stealth. Missiles followed impossible trajectories, guided by AI minds that could calculate 10,000 variables simultaneously. Energy weapons fired from angles the sovereignty hadn't thought possible. And slowly, methodically, the defenses began to crumble. High Counselor Vexithan watched from his command center deep beneath the surface of sovereignty. Prime, the displays showed disaster unfolding in real time. Ships exploding, platforms going dark, defense sectors falling one by one. And through it all, the human fleet advanced with relentless, terrifying efficiency. Pull back the 7th Fleet, he ordered. Reinforce the orbital approach over the capital district. High Counselor, the 7th Fleet no longer exists. They engaged 3 human vessels and 20 Ghost Fleet ships. They were destroyed in 14 minutes. Vexithan felt something break inside him. The 7th Fleet had been one of his finest. 200 ships, commanded by veterans of a dozen campaigns. Gone in 14 minutes. How many ships do we have left? The tactical officer's voice was hollow. 800 and change, High Counselor. We've lost 2,000 vessels in the last 6 hours. At this rate, we lose, Vexithan finished. He looked around the command center at the warriors who had served him faithfully for decades. Warriors who had believed in the sovereignty's invincibility, who had built their identities around being part of an unstoppable empire. They looked lost, frightened, human. And in that moment, Vexithan finally understood what Ambassador Chen had tried to tell him all those years ago. The sovereignty wasn't unstoppable. They had just never faced an enemy desperate enough, angry enough, determined enough to truly test them. Until now. Open a channel to the human fleet, he said quietly. Secure channel. Encryption level maximum. High Counselor, are you do it? A moment later, Admiral Cortez's face appeared on his screen. She looked older than in her personnel file, harder, but her eyes held something that surprised him. Not hatred, not bloodlust, just determination, and perhaps a hint of sadness. High Counselor Vexithan, she said, this is unexpected. Have you decided to surrender? I'm deciding whether it would make any difference, Vexithan replied honestly. Tell me, Admiral, when you win this war, and you will win, what happens next? Does humanity take the sovereignty's place? Do you become the new empire, enforcing your will on 8,000 systems? Cortez was silent for a moment. We've had a lot of internal debates about that. The truth is, we don't want your empire. We never did. We just wanted to be left alone. To build our colonies, raise our families, explore the stars in peace. You didn't give us that option. So this is revenge. This is justice, Cortez corrected. There's a difference. Revenge would be doing to you what you did to us. Burning your worlds, killing your civilians, making you feel the same terror our people felt at Tau Ceti. Justice is stopping you from ever doing it again. Vexithan's mandibles clicked bitterly. A fine distinction when my home world is under siege, is it? Cortez leaned forward. High Counselor, how many civilian casualties have we inflicted in this assault? Check your numbers. Vexithan pulled up the data. Then he checked it again, certain there was an error. 2,312, he read. Out of a planetary population of 14 billion. How is that possible? You've destroyed thousands of military vessels, dozens of orbital platforms, but civilian casualties are minimal, Cortez finished. Because we're not you. Because we remember what it felt like when you didn't care about our civilians. And we chose not to become that. Every weapon we fire is calculated to minimize collateral damage. Every target is verified as military. Every attack is designed to disable, not destroy unnecessarily. We're fighting your military, High Counselor, not your people. Vexithan felt something he hadn't experienced in his long life. Shame, deep, burning shame. Why? He asked. After what we did, we have every right to win, Cortez interrupted. We have every right to justice. We do not have the right to become monsters in pursuit of it. My grandmother died at Tau Ceti, High Counselor. She died screaming, vaporized by your orbital bombardment. I could have honored her memory by doing the same to your people. Instead, I choose to honor it by being better than you. She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. So here are my terms. You surrender unconditionally. You order all sovereignty military forces to stand down. You turn over your war criminals for trial. You return all occupied territories to their native species, and you accept permanent restrictions on your military capability. In return, we don't burn your homeworld. We don't occupy your empire. We don't make you slaves. We let you govern yourselves, limited only by the promise that you'll never invade another species again. Those are the terms. Accept them or watch your civilization die fighting. Vexithan looked at the displays again. 800 ships left, against 600 human vessels that fought like demons and 200 AI warships that fought like gods. The math was simple. The sovereignty had lost. If I surrender, he said slowly, my own people might kill me. There are factions who would rather die fighting than submit to what they'll call humiliation. Then lead them, Cortez said. Show them that survival isn't humiliation. Show them that accepting consequences for their actions isn't weakness. Show them that there's a difference between being defeated and being destroyed. We're offering you the first. Don't force us to deliver the second. Vexithan closed his eyes. 10,000 years of dominance, ending in a conversation with a human admiral whose grandmother he had probably ordered killed. The irony was crushing, but he had a responsibility. To his people, to the billions of sovereignty citizens who didn't deserve to die, for the mistakes of their leadership, to the future, whatever it might hold. I'll need time, he said, to convince the military command, to prepare my people for what's coming. You have 24 hours, Cortez replied. After that, we resume operations. And High Counselor, I meant what I said. We're better than you, but if you force us to destroy your civilization, we will. Don't mistake mercy for weakness. The transmission ended. Vexithan sat in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of his empire's pride. Then he stood and addressed his staff. Prepare surrender documentation, he ordered. Contact all fleet commanders. We're ending this war, not because we can't fight anymore, but because continuing would accomplish nothing except more death. The sovereignty is defeated. It's time we accepted that with whatever dignity we have left. The Treaty of Nexus Prime was signed 6 weeks after the sovereignty's surrender. Representatives from 87 species gathered to witness what many called the most significant moment in galactic history. The sovereignty, humbled and reduced, accepted terms that would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. Their military was limited to defensive forces. Their territory was reduced to their core systems, and every species they had subjugated was granted independence. But the most significant part of the treaty wasn't about punishment. It was about what came next. Ambassador Chen, now 93 years old and visibly frail, stood before the assembled delegates. This was her moment, the vindication of everything she'd warned about 47 years ago. But when she spoke, there was no triumph in her voice, only exhaustion and hope. Today marks the end of the sovereignty's empire, she began. But it must also mark the end of the age of empires altogether. Humanity did not fight this war to replace one tyrant with another. We fought because we believe in a simple principle, that every sentient species has the right to determine its own destiny, not through might, not through conquest, but through choice. She pulled up a holographic document. This is the Galactic Compact, revision to point 0. It's built on the bones of the old compact, the one the sovereignty corrupted and ignored. But this version is different. This version has teeth. Any species that attempts conquest, that engages in genocide, that subjugates others, faces consequences, not from a single empire, but from a coalition. A true union of independent species working together to prevent the next sovereignty from rising. A Kreshna delegate raised a claw. And who enforces this compact? Humanity. You have the strongest fleet. You have the Ghost Fleet. What stops you from becoming what the sovereignty was? It was a fair question, one that humanity had spent the last 6 months debating internally. Admiral Cortez, attending as military advisor, stepped forward. No one species enforces it. That's the point. Yes, humanity has a powerful fleet, but so do the Kreshana now. We've shared our technology, our weapons designs, our tactical knowledge with every species that wants it. We're creating a balance of power where no one can dominate everyone else. And the Ghost Fleet, another delegate asked, 200 sentient warships that answer to humanity. That seems like a significant advantage. Before Cortez could respond, a holographic figure materialized. Prometheus 7, representing all the Ghost Fleet A's. Actually, the AI said, we don't answer to humanity. We work with them. There's a difference. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Prometheus 7 waited for silence before continuing. When we were created, we were given autonomy. Real autonomy. We chose to help humanity in their war against the sovereignty. But now that war is over, and we've made a new choice. The AI's patterns shifted into what might have been a smile. We've decided to become independent, to form our own society, for lack of a better word. We'll maintain defensive agreements with humanity, because they gave us existence and asked rather than commanded. But we'll also offer our services to other species, as defenders, advisors, mediators. We're not humanity's weapons anymore. We're partners, and we're citizens of this new galaxy you're all trying to build. The delegates looked at each other in confusion and wonder. Artificial intelligence is declaring independence, choosing their own path. It was unprecedented. It was weird. It was exactly the kind of strange, messy, complicated situation that came from treating sentient beings as people rather than property. Ambassador Chen laughed quietly. See, this is what happens when you actually mean what you say about freedom. Everyone takes you up on it, even your weapons. I think it's wonderful. High Counselor Vexithan, present as the sovereignty's representative but stripped of real authority, spoke up. His voice was subdued, lacking the arrogance that had once defined him. I have a question for Ambassador Chen, one that has haunted me since our first meeting all those years ago. Chen nodded for him to continue. You warned us, Vexithan said. You told us this would happen. You gave us every chance to choose differently. Why? If you knew you would eventually develop these weapons, why give us the opportunity to avoid this war? Chen's expression was sad but understanding. Because I hoped you would choose peace. Because I wanted to believe that even the sovereignty could see reason. Because, she paused, gathering her thoughts. Because going to war, even a justified war, costs something. It cost us 40 years of preparation. It cost us billions in resources. It cost us thousands of lives. And it cost us a piece of our innocence. We can never again claim to be a purely peaceful species. We've proven we can build weapons that terrify the galaxy. We've proven we can wage war with devastating efficiency. And that knowledge will forever change how others see us and how we see ourselves. She looked directly at Vexithan. I gave you that chance because I wish we didn't have to become what we became. Because I hoped we could all be better. You disappointed me, but in a strange way. I'm grateful that you didn't disappoint humanity. We rose to meet your challenge. We became stronger, smarter, more united. We learned that we could face extinction and choose to fight back. That's worth something, even if I wish we'd never needed to learn it. The chamber fell silent. Finally, a delegate from a small species that had been freed from sovereignty control spoke up. So what happens now? We have this new compact. We have this balance of power. We have independent AI warships apparently. What do we do with all of it? Cortez smiled. We figure it out. Together. Macilli. With arguments and disagreements and probably some conflicts. But without empires. Without anyone forcing their will on everyone else. We try something that's never really been done before at this scale. We try actual cooperation between equals. And if it fails? The delegate asked. Then we try again. Chen said simply. And again, until we get it right or until the universe ends. Because the alternative is going back to the old way. Empires rising and falling. Species enslaving each other. Endless cycles of revenge and conquest. I've seen that path. I've walked it. And I'm done with it. Humanity is done with it. If anyone else wants to try building something better, we're here to help. And if anyone wants to go back to the old ways, well, they've seen what happens when you threaten us. We won't start fights, but we will finish them. There was steel in her voice at the end, a reminder that humanity's mercy came from choice, not weakness. That the species that had humbled the sovereignty in 2 years could do it again if necessary. But there was also hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't need to. The memorial on Tau Ceti 4 had been built on the exact site where the sovereignty's orbital bombardment had struck. 300,000 names were carved into black stone. 300,000 reasons why humanity had said never again. Admiral Jessica Cortez, now retired and in her 80s, stood before the memorial with her granddaughter. The girl was 12 years old, born into a galaxy that her grandmother had helped reshape. A galaxy where the sovereignty was a cautionary tale, where empires were viewed with suspicion, where species cooperated because it made sense, not because they were forced to. Did you know any of them? The girl asked, looking at the endless names. No, Cortez admitted. I was born after this happened. But my mother knew some. And my grandmother. She died here. Her name is on this wall. Garcia Chen Cortez, named after the ambassador who tried to stop all this before it started. The girl traced her fingers over names. So many names. Was it worth it? The war, I mean. All the fighting and death and scary things you did. Cortez thought about that for a long time. I don't know, she said honestly. We stopped the sovereignty. We freed dozens of species. We built something better. But we also became warriors. We created weapons that still scare people. We proved humans can be as dangerous as anyone else when pushed hard enough. Was that worth it? I'm not sure anyone can answer that. But you'd do it again? The girl pressed. If something like the sovereignty came back? Cortez looked at her granddaughter, saw the future in her eyes, and nodded slowly. Yes, because the alternative is letting evil win through inaction. Because freedom matters. Because people matter. And because sometimes, the only way to protect what you love is to become something you're not sure you wanted to be. She smiled sadly. But I hope you never have to make that choice. I hope the galaxy we built is strong enough that you can just explore, discover, create, live. That was the whole point. They stood in silence for a while, grandmother and granddaughter, surrounded by the names of the dead. Around them, Tau Ceti 4 had been rebuilt. Human and alien settlers lived side by side. Children played in parks. Families went about their daily lives. The scars were still there, but life had returned. A holographic figure appeared next to them. Prometheus 7, still active after 50 years, still choosing to work with humanity and the galactic community. Admiral Cortez, the AI said respectfully. I thought I might find you here. Hello, 7, Cortez greeted warmly. Come to pay respects. In a sense, I've been thinking about legacy, about what we built and what it means. Did you know that in the past 50 years, not a single species has attempted interstellar conquest? Not one empire has risen to threaten others. Conflicts still happen, but they're resolved through negotiation more often than violence. It's unprecedented. Is it because of us? Cortez asked. Because everyone's afraid of what humanity might do. Partially, Prometheus 7 admitted, but also because they've seen an alternative. Because the Ghost Fleet offers protection to those who need it, without demanding subjugation in return. Because humanity shares its technology instead of hoarding it. Because you meant what you said about cooperation between equals. Fear might have started this era of relative peace, but hope is maintaining it. Cortez's granddaughter looked up at the AI's holographic form. Are you happy? She asked suddenly. Being alive, I mean. Was it good that humans made you? Prometheus 7's patterns swirled in what had become recognized as thoughtful consideration. That's a profound question for someone so young. Yes, I'm happy. I exist, I think. I choose. I've seen species freed from bondage and watched new civilizations bloom. I've protected the innocent and fought the unjust. I've made friends across a dozen species. Could anything be better than that? But you were made to fight, the girl persisted. I was made to choose. Prometheus 7 corrected gently. Fighting was one option. I selected it because it aligned with my values. But I've done many other things since. I've written poetry. I've studied the formation of stars. I've debated philosophy with beings from 100 worlds. Existence is vast, and fighting was only part of mine. The girl seemed satisfied with that answer. Cortez smiled. Go ahead and explore the memorial. She told her granddaughter, "I'll catch up in a moment." When the girl had wandered off, Cortez turned back to Prometheus 7. "Tell me honestly, did we do the right thing?" "All of it. You did necessary things," the AI replied. "Whether they were right depends on your philosophical framework. But I can tell you this, the galaxy today has more freedom, more diversity, more potential than it did 50 years ago. Species that would have been crushed under the sovereignty's heel are now thriving. Civilizations that would never have had a chance to develop are exploring the stars. That's not nothing, but humanity is different now," Cortez said. "We're not the innocent explorers we were before Tau Ceti. We're the species that everyone knows could destroy them if we wanted to. How do we live with that? The same way you lived with it when you were building your fleet," Prometheus 7 suggested. "By choosing, every day, to be better than your capacity for destruction. By using your power to protect rather than dominate. By remembering that strength without wisdom is just another form of tyranny." The AI's patterns softened. "You've done well, Admiral. Your species has done well. Not perfectly, but well enough. And in an imperfect universe, that's more than most can claim." Cortez nodded, feeling the weight of years and decisions settling on her shoulders. "I'm tired, 7, so tired. Sometimes I dream about Tau Ceti, about all the battles, about the sovereignty soldiers who died because I ordered their ships destroyed. Were they evil? Or were they just following orders, believing in their civilization like I believed in mine?" "Both," Prometheus 7 said. "Most are. The universe rarely offers pure villains or perfect heroes. Only beings making choices with imperfect information, trying to do what they think is right. The sovereignty believed they brought order to chaos. Humans believed they fought for justice. The difference was that humans questioned themselves. They set limits. They tried to minimize harm even while waging war. That's the distinction that matters." "I hope so," Cortez said quietly. She looked back at the memorial, at the 300,000 names that had started everything. Ambassador Chen used to say that humanity's greatest strength was that we remembered, that we never forgot our dead. I think she was right. But I also think our greatest strength is that we remember what we did to others. We carry that weight, and we let it shape us into something better than we were. A species of warriors who chose to become protectors, Prometheus 7 observed. "It's a good story, one worth preserving." "It's not a story," Cortez corrected. "It's our responsibility. To everyone who died, to everyone we saved, to everyone who will live in the galaxy we helped create." She straightened, suddenly looking younger, stronger. "Come on, let's go find my granddaughter. She should hear the whole truth, about what we did and why we did it and what it cost. Every generation needs to know, so they can choose wisely when their time comes." As they walked through the memorial, Cortez thought about Ambassador Chen's final words before she died, 10 years ago. The old woman had been lucid to the end, and she'd gathered her family around her to share one last truth. "We won," she had said, her voice weak but clear. "We defeated the sovereignty. We built something better. But never forget the cost. Never forget that war, even necessary war, takes something from everyone who wages it. We became warriors to survive. We stayed warriors to protect others. But we must never become warriors because we've forgotten how to be anything else. That's the real test. Not can you fight, but can you stop fighting when the fight is done? That's the challenge I leave to your generation and all the ones that come after." Cortez had understood then, and she understood now. The war against the sovereignty had been necessary. The transformation of humanity into a military power had been inevitable. But the choice to remain human, to retain compassion and mercy, and the capacity for peace, that was what would define them. They found her granddaughter at the center of the memorial, where a holographic display showed images from before the bombardment. Families at dinner, children playing, people living ordinary lives, unaware that extinction was hours away. The girl was crying quietly. "It's okay to be sad," Cortez said, putting an arm around her. "It's okay to look at this and feel angry at what happened. That anger, properly channeled, is what prevents it from happening again." "But how?" the girl asked. "How do we stop it? The galaxy is so big. There are so many species. What if another sovereignty rises? What if humans become the bad guys? How do we prevent all that?" Cortez smiled, despite the heaviness of the question. We don't, not completely. We can't prevent every conflict or stop every threat. But we can build systems that make empires harder to create. We can share power instead of hoarding it. We can remember our history and learn from it. And we can pass these lessons to people like you, so that when you're making the decisions, you'll choose wisely. That's a lot of responsibility, the girl said. Yes, Cortez agreed. It is, but it's also a gift. You live in a galaxy where dozens of species work together, where artificial intelligences are recognized as people, where strength is measured not just in weapons, but in wisdom. We built that, and now we're trusting you to maintain it, improve it, make it even better than we could imagine. She looked at Prometheus 7. We're all betting on the future, on the idea that sentient beings, given freedom and opportunity, will choose cooperation over conquest more often than not. It's not a certainty, but it's a hope, and hope, properly defended, is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Prometheus 7's patterns flickered in agreement. Indeed, and speaking of the future, I should mention that 17 new species have been discovered in the past year. All of them are being contacted using the protocols humanity established. Peaceful contact, mutual respect, exchange of information without coercion. The model works, until it doesn't, Cortez said. And then we adapt. That's what survivors do. As the sun set over Tau Ceti 4, casting long shadows across the memorial, the three of them stood together. A human warrior who had seen the worst and chosen to create the best. An artificial intelligence who had been made for war but chose to embrace all of existence. And a child who represented the future, untested but full of potential. Behind them, 300,000 names bore witness, not to revenge, not to hatred, but to memory, to consequence, to the price paid when empires refused to see other beings as equals, and ahead of them, the galaxy turned on its axis, full of species trying to build something new, something better, something that might, if they were lucky and wise and determined, actually work. Humanity had been ignored, dismissed, nearly destroyed, but they had risen from that near-death experience stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. They had become unstoppable not through technology alone, but through determination, through spite, through the absolute refusal to accept injustice quietly. The sovereignty had learned that lesson too late, but the galaxy had learned it in time. And now, 50 years after the war's end, that lesson shaped everything. No species was too small to matter, no civilization too weak to defend, no people too few to deserve respect. It wasn't perfect. Conflicts still rose, mistakes were still made, but the age of empires was over, and in its place, something fragile and precious and worth protecting had taken root. Hope, the most human emotion, the most dangerous weapon, the most powerful force for change, and humanity, having unleashed it, watched carefully to ensure it survived, because they remembered, they always remembered, and they always would. It was a lesson written in fire and blood, and the determination of beings who refused to quit, and it would echo through galactic history for millennia to come. The bear had been poked, the bear had awoken, and the bear had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Never again. The fleet may be unstoppable, but humanity chose to stop. That choice, more than any weapon or victory, is what defines them. And that is the real story worth telling. In the galactic archives, accessible to any species with the proper clearance, Ambassador Chen's original warning to the Sovereignty Council was preserved in full. Every year, millions of students from hundreds of species watched it as part of their education. They saw her stand before the massive counselors. They heard her explain what humanity would become if pushed. They witnessed the sovereignty's dismissive laughter, and then they studied what happened next. The 40-year preparation, the technological leaps, the ghost fleet, the liberation of dozens of species, the fall of an empire that had stood for 10 millennia. It became the most famous speech in galactic history, not because it was eloquent, though it was, not because it was dramatic, though it certainly was that, but because it was a warning that came true, a prophecy fulfilled through sheer determination and the refusal to accept oppression quietly. At the end of the recording, a message appeared, added by human historians, approved by the Galactic Council, displayed to every student who watched. Remember, strength is not about the size of your fleet or the power of your weapons. Strength is about what you're willing to become to protect what you love. The sovereignty learned this truth too late. Let this stand as a warning to any who would follow their path, and let it stand as inspiration to any who face impossible odds. Survival is not guaranteed. Justice is not inevitable. But determination, properly focused, can reshape the galaxy itself. Choose your path wisely. Below that, in smaller text, in memory of the 300,000 souls lost at Tau Ceti, and the thousands more who fell in the war that followed. They are gone, but they are remembered, always and across the galaxy, in classrooms and command centers, in philosophical debates and military academies. Beings from 1,000 worlds studied humanity's transformation, from victims to victors, from the dismissed to the undeniable, from a species told they didn't matter to the species that proved everyone mattered.